Have your attention, please. A big welcome to all here today, and also to the many people who are on Zoom with us today. This is a unique hybrid meeting. This is the first session of the 2023 Ani Suite Scholar in Residence program with Rabbi Jonathan Crane. Rabbi, a special welcome to you. You and I have communicated very, very intensively over a long period of time on the program and the details, and it's great to have you here with us today. At Anshai Torah, our tagline is "Welcome home," and we welcome you to our home. Thank you. We live in a very challenging moral time and ethical time in the 20th and 21st century. In fact, today, as you know, is Holocaust Memorial Day. And Rabbi Crane is today's leading thinker, teacher, author, and exponent of Jewish ethics. And we look forward to your thought-provoking discussions over the next 2 days as you discuss Jewish ethics in a dynamic era. Today is a little bit of an experiment for us because it's a live meeting and it's also a hybrid session with some in the social hall and quite a lot of people on the Zoom. So the plan is we're going to have Rabbi Crane give his presentation, followed by a Q&A discussion and a Q&A session discussion. And we're going to alternate between questions from the hall and questions on the Zoom. Rabbi Kushnick is going to be moderating the Zoom. We ask people on Zoom to please put their questions in the chat function, and Rabbi Kushnick will bring those questions to us over here. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the hardworking Scholar in Residence Committee, and we'll talk more about that later tonight. Thank our rabbis, the staff, and especially our sponsors for the generous support of this annual event. Without your ongoing support, we'd not be able to bring high-level speakers of the highest caliber in the Jewish world to Plano every year. In particular, I want to thank the family of Ani Suite, who are our presenting sponsors, Janice Sweet Weinberg and Art Weinberg, Cindy Sweet Moskowitz and Mitch Moskowitz, and Kathy Sweet Brook and Joel Brook, for their ongoing support over many, many years of this signature program. Also, special thanks to Manuel and Debbie Rajanoff for the generous support over many, many years. Today at lunch, Rabbi Crane's talk is Mapping Ethics, which introduces ethics and its various components, sets the stage for the rest of the weekend. We look forward to you joining us this evening at the Kabbalat Shabbat service, which will start at 6:15, not the usual 6:30, during which Rabbi Crane will deliver Devar Torah. This will be followed by the keynote dinner and the keynote address, which will also be live streamed. Tomorrow morning, Rabbi Crane will deliver another Devar during the service, followed by Kiddush lunch and another thought-provoking discussion, and this also will be on live stream. Full details of all the sessions and programs and Rabbi Crane are in the programs which are on the table. So with that, please help join me in welcoming Rabbi Crane. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just talk amongst yourselves for 5 seconds and I'll engage with you. I just need to share screen. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I can't say Shabbat Shalom just yet. That's tonight. But it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor and a privilege to join the great list of scholars, giants in the field of modern Jewish thought and ethics and history that you've had over the last several years. And it's truly a humbling opportunity for me to join that, to join the list of scholars that you've had here. So thank you very much to the Sweet family, and everybody else who has contributed to make this weekend possible. It's a gift. It's a testament to you, your own committee, your own community to invest in yourself, to bring in scholars from around the Jewish world. And again, it's really my pleasure to join with you this weekend and to learn with you. Today, I thought that what we could do is have an opportunity to just get to know each other a little bit, and also get to know this squishy thing called ethics. I have found that among my students, I teach at Emory. I teach predominantly in the med school and also in our Masters of Bioethics program, but I often find my students unclear what exactly ethics is. And so I hope that through this conversation, we can gain a little bit of clarity on what we might mean when we use this squishy term. I do intend for this to be an interactive session. If my computer will turn on. So, hold on a second. Can you all hear me when I am talking, including the people online?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for responding. Please excuse me for a moment. Okay, so what are we going to do today? We're going to first unpack this thing called ethics, and then we're going to look at some of the components of what ethics is, and then the process of ethical deliberation as Crane understands it. And then maybe we'll talk about some sample cases. So who here can give me a preliminary definition of what is this thing called ethics? And this is meant to be interactive. I do not like listening to myself drone on and on and on, so please do chime in. Yeah, what's a working definition? Doing what is right. Excellent. The way that we interact with each other. So in other words, that's different from doing what's right. They build on each other. Interesting. Yes. Okay, interesting. So when things collide, we have to make a decision to navigate them. Great, yes. Okay, so a moral compass. So it's not so much about what is right out there or so much as what is going on between two people, but more about your character, a moral compass. So it's more internal, like a virtue. Interesting. That's another possibility. Oh, who decides? Well, obviously I decide. I mean, that's obvious, right? But that is a major question. So whose decision is going to determine the norm for, say, a family or a community or a nation state? That's a really good question. Yes, in the back. Ah, there it is. Yeah. So there's this thing called God. And God is an awesome idea, an awesome entity. And this God, at least in a Judaic worldview, promulgates commands. And so we have this exogenous authority coming down and revealing to us what we ought to be doing. But that requires a lot of the audience to give over to that authority. And we'll unpack what some of that might be. So these are all varieties of different ways that we can think about ethics. And I hope that what we'll do is we'll be able to tease some of those apart and better understand where they fit together. In the middle of the 20th century, Edmund Pinkoff came along and he was reflecting on a subfield of ethics, one that was quite animating the field of ethics writ large at that time period, which was bioethics, which was looking at concerns of what's going on in the biomedical sciences. And he looked at the field and began to describe it as quandary ethics. In other words, there was a problem in search of some sort of solution. And that's what he saw going on most of the time. One of the most popular quandaries of that time period is this quandary. Who here has seen this quandary before? Can you describe it for us? So you're describing what's on the screen, which is a train is coming down the track here. This is the proverbial U at the switch, and the train can either take out 5 people or 1 people. This is also known as the trolley problem, the trolley car problem. So what are your options? You can stop the train. Good. What else can you do? Get off the track. All right, that's another strategy. What else can you do? Okay, so now you have to decide. If you can't get these people off the track, you have to now decide which one are you going to protect and which one you're going to keep vulnerable to a lethal attack of some sort. All right, so yes? Oh, that's God's job. So that's another strategy, which is to step away and say, what's going to unfold will unfold. That's a quietistic approach. Great. What else what other options might there be? We can't go that far yet. Oh, you're jumping the game. Just with the information right now, your options are to do nothing, scream at the people. Another one is to stop the train somehow, throw yourself on the tracks. So how many of you are ready to be a martyr to save unknown populations? Another one is to throw the switch. No, throwing the switch will redirect the train. So right now it is scheduled to take out the 5. So are you going to throw the switch so that it will take out the 1? Who here is willing to throw the switch so that it will take out only 1 individual so as to protect 5? The other option is for you to not throw the switch, and it's right now scheduled to come down and take out the 5. So in other words, if you don't touch the switch, 5 people will die and 1 person will live. So who's going to not throw the switch? Nobody? No one wants to allow the 5 people to die? And who here is willing to throw the switch so as 1 person would be the ultimate victim? Throw the switch and beat the train. Good. That's a good strategy. I hope you've got your running shoes on. Yeah. Oh, you think that you're the driver of the train? Interesting. Okay. Who else was willing to throw the switch? There was somebody over here. So why? Why were you willing to throw the switch so as to take out that 1 individual? It's not even ethically questionable. Okay, perhaps, yeah. What's your name? Glenn, I appreciate your enterprising question there or assumptions there, Glenn. You are, again, jumping the lesson, which is you're asking for qualitative information about who these people are. Right now, we don't have that information. Right now, we only have quantitative information. And the real question at hand that the question that we're wrestling with is, are you willing to do what is necessary to save the most amount of people possible or not? And it seems that you've got at least a fraction of you who are willing to sacrifice a minority in order to protect the majority population.
What I'm thinking is that if you throw the switch, then you're doing something active towards the death of that person. If you don't throw the switch, you in an inactive way, of course, the death of that child. So it's you take an action, you not take it.
So now you're opening up this question of the difference between acts of commission and acts of omission. And are they equally morally liable? And there will be some people who say, yes, they are one and the same. And there will be some people who say, no, that if you engage in an act of commission, you are more responsible for the consequences or the outcomes of that action than if you just didn't do the action and something bad happened. Yes.
You've given us this subject. So we've taken protecting the train itself out of the story. You're going to say that you're going to have to, the switch is now switched one way or the other way. And we're going to decide which way to pull the switch. It can't affect the train. Hold on. Is that correct?
So there are many different iterations of this trolley problem. So the way that I have set it up is that right now the track is designed, the train is right now scheduled to take out the 5, the larger population. So if you do nothing, 5 people are going to die. 1 person is going to survive. The question is, are you willing to actively move that lever so that the train will shift course, save the 5, and take out that 1 individual? You're willing to shift the lever. Why?
Because the greater good is to say 5 expensive ones. You have no choice, it's done. So I either have 1 or 5.
Great. So this is getting at, he said that it makes sense for us to go ahead and move the lever so as to protect those 5, take out that 1 individual, and the rationale, the reason justifying that position, the conclusion, is that you're going to save more people than not. And that is called a consequentialist logic. The consequences, the outcomes justifies the means. The means being here, changing the course of that trolley. There are many iterations of this trolley problem, and I'm sure that you've come across them in your life, but this is a good heuristic tool. And of course, life is messier than this, right? But it's a good heuristic tool to get people starting to think about, okay, what are you going to do? What's your conclusion? What's your position on a particular item? And then you have to ask yourself, well, why? Why do I hold this position? Why am I going to make that decision this way? What are the reasons that I am evoking in myself to justify and explain this to myself and to others? That's correct. Not doing something when you have agency is also a choice, and it reflects your moral convictions. Absolutely. So let's get to Glenn's comment now, which is, who are these people who are standing on the track in the first place? How did they get there? Who are they? So let's imagine that the crowd of 5 are convicted murderers, and the one on the right is the person who's going to solve all of the world's problems. So what are you going to do? You're not going to pull the switch now. So with more information, who here would not pull the switch and allow those 5 convicted murderers to die? Yeah, more people are willing to do that. Anybody want to still throw the switch and take out this person who's going to be the panacea, the Messiah? How do you know? Let's just say that you know. Let's just say that you know all of this qualitative information about these individuals, okay? Let's play along with the hypothesis. Yes. So in other words, you're still willing to take out that one individual to protect the 5. Oh, you're close, but not quite, right? But isn't it interesting that now once you know qualitative information, your conclusion might shift. You're now willing to put more people, quantitatively more people in lethal danger in order to protect a minority population because you now know certain kinds of information about who those people are. And if we change up the hypothesis again and say, for example, this is a family member of yours, and these are complete strangers, what are you willing to do? And ask that question again. And your logic will probably shift yet again. So it's interesting how our minds will play with us and challenge us to not only discern what our position is when we are meeting a moral dilemma, and then how we justify it. And so this often we are encountered with people who will ask us, what is the correct answer for a dilemma like this? Or is what I'm about to do ethical? And I hope that you will leave not only this lunch, but this weekend unasking those questions. Because whenever you ask an is question, it forces a yes or no answer. And it doesn't elicit from yourself or from your audience a robust ethical deliberation. Ethics is not a yes or no. It's not either it is or it isn't. It's something richer. So, what is ethics? If you had to fill in the blanks, what would you fill in the blanks with? For those of you who are on Zoom, you can put it in the chat. What are your options? Yeah. Choice. Don't give it away. Choices and consequences. Okay. Sorry. Press the wrong button. Choices and consequences. What else could it be? Good and more good. The easy and the difficult. Many of us wrestle with that, especially when we're younger. What other options could it be? Could be right and wrong, good and bad, good and evil. Many times people will say that ethics is that kind of deliberation. But if it were, then it just so happens that you don't need folks like me. Ethics is not that. Because if ethics were only the deliberation between right and wrong, good and evil, the holy and the unholy, then you know what you ought to be doing. Ethics is, as you said earlier, the deliberation between two things that are alike. It's the deliberation between one law and another law, and when they are mutually exclusive for a particular moment, which one should supersede? It's two values that you hold dear, and they are now mutually exclusive in this moment. Which one should take priority? It's two goods, two interests that are in conflict, and you have to deliberate between the two. That is what ethics is used for. And there are many moments in your life, and you're at one right this moment. There are many moments in your life where you have to make an ethical deliberation. And the moment that I'm talking about is a meal. Meals are always an ethical deliberative moment. And you have conflicting values. And we'll talk about what some of those values are. But food is one of the places where we are constantly rubbing up against an ethical opportunity, and we often ignore the ethical features of food. But that's a whole other conversation for another time. But ethics is all around us. We're always being challenged to think between like and like. And this helps us gain clarity on what our core values are. So these are the components. that I think make up ethics. Ethics includes our values, our motivations, our reasons, and ultimately our final conclusion. And I wanted to unpack over the next few minutes, what are these key ingredients that make up ethics? So let's begin here with this statement, 2 + 1 = 4. What kind of words would you use to describe this statement? Incorrect, why?
Everything I know.
And you know a great deal, yes, everything that you know. It doesn't match that. And okay, so what would you do if I take my fist and I come up to you and I hit you on your cheek? How would you describe that behavior? Irrational. Why?
Very unlikely I would have
Okay. And what's our context?
given
Right now.
Knew that we don't really know each other.
Right. And we're in a synagogue. And it's really not cool for a rabbi to assault anybody. Really. But throw a rink around us and call it the Worldwide Wrestling Foundation. And now I come up to you and I do the exact same behavior. How would you evaluate that behavior in that context?
Part of the context of what would be okay.
So in other words, you can evaluate the stuff of this world to assess whether it fits and is appropriate, whether it's protected by the rules, if you know what game you're playing. And so you can assess things, whether they are right or wrong, appropriate or inappropriate, protected or unprotected, correct or false, based on the game that you're playing. A foul in basketball would be fair play in rugby. But you need to know what playing field you're playing in order to be able to assess that thing that you're measuring. And so, for example, when I'm teaching my medical students, we talk about the Tarasoff warning. Who here has heard of the Tarasoff warning? What is the Tarasoff warning? That's right. So if you are a healthcare provider and a patient has articulated homicidal ideation towards a victim who is not in this clinical moment, what is your obligation? And because of unfortunate circumstances in the state of California, we now have something called the Tarasoff warning, which in certain states, you, the healthcare provider, you are obligated to pick up the phone and call the intended victim to get out of Dodge. They're in danger. And your job is to protect them. And you are obliged to make that phone call, and you are held liable if you don't. There are other states that say, well, frankly, you're permitted to do so, but you're not obliged to do so. And welcome to the state of, not Texas, but Georgia, where I live. In Georgia, it is the only state in the country where it's damned if you do and damned if you don't. It is the only state where if you make that phone call, you're held liable. And if you don't make that phone call, you're also held liable. So how do you protect the intended victim? Well, thankfully, some smart legislators in the state of Georgia created a set of legal tools for healthcare providers that you can involuntarily restrain somebody who is articulating homicidal ideation and involuntarily hospitalize them. And that then protects two competing goods: the good of protecting that intended victim and the good of protecting the confidential information that this patient is seeing you in the first place and is expressing a homicidal ideation. HIPAA, it would be a HIPAA violation for you to make that phone call. And so Georgia has said, well, frankly, we can thread this needle and provide you other tools so that you can solve that problem. But you need to know what jurisdiction you're in, what game field you're playing on, in order to be able to evaluate whether what you're about to do is right or wrong, whether it's protected or unprotected. Now, this is a great way to evaluate the stuff of this world, but it's not the only way. So let's try another one. Oh, by the way, you thought I was playing mathematics, but I was playing aesthetics. So again, you need to know what game I'm playing. So let's say I show up to work blitzed, drunk. It's not illegal, but we would use other kinds of terminology to describe that behavior. We would often use terms more akin to morality. We would describe it in terms of badness and goodness. And that's a different language than terms of legality. And so now we have a fairly rich way to map ethics, the stuff of this world. What would you put in the top left quadrant up here? Things that we think are morally bad, but the law yet will protect. You will not be arrested for it. What kind of behavior would you put up there? What kind of things that you've seen in the national arena or in personal lives? Yeah. Lying? What kind of lying? Oh, okay. Another version of that could be taking advantage of, say, financial loopholes, tax loopholes, okay? Is perfectly legal. And yet, as a society, we don't really commend it. We condemn it as a society. There's another one that I often come across that we put in that quadrant, and that is infidelity. It's not illegal here in the United States, but it's really uncomfortable. What would you put in the bottom left quadrant? Things that we condemn morally and you would be arrested for. Okay, thank you. And what else would you put down? All theft. Go back to your high school philosophy class, all right, where you're talking about the single parent breaking into 7-Eleven to steal milk for this hungry child. Are all thieves really both morally bad and legally wrong? So what else could we put down? Pardon? Carrying a gun? Well, in many places, that is both, that would be up here. Good. Assault. Assault of all sorts. We can put down here. What would you put down here? We love, and yet the law does not like. Abortion, again, it depends where you are. It depends on the state, exactly, and the jurisdiction. It's not that anybody loves abortion. It's a very tragic decision. But in some places, it is legally protected. In other places, it's legally circumscribed. Very good, excellent. The vigilantes, the people who wear tights and capes, our Wonder Womans, our Batmans and Robins of the world. We love our superheroes, but what they do is they engage in extrajudicial behavior. They take the law into their own hands, and so the law would hate it if all y'all became superheroes. I know that you are, but if you did behave that way all the time, it would be anarchy. And so the law does not want you to engage in extrajudicial behavior. And yet our society, we love our vigilantes because they do good for society. And what would you put up here in the top right? Tzedakah? Yes, of course. You would put yourself because you do tzedakah, right? Well, again, I tell my medical students, it'll be very difficult for you to always reach this upper quadrant, especially in the field of psychiatry. Right. And that's another form of tzedakah, of generosity. That's correct. Giving your organs to a stranger. So let's complicate this map with a third dimension. Say I have a scholarship and I'm asking you to publish some articles on a new pill that I have for some psychiatric condition. And I want you to publish saying that my pill is better than all of the other competitors. Are you willing to, and it's going to be good for your career. It will help you get your next job. It will help me sell my pills. And it should do some good for the patients. But are you willing to fudge the data in order to make that all come about? And my scholarship for you, my grant for you is contingent upon you publishing those findings. So are you willing to do that? And this gives us a third dimension, which is the dimension of utility. Are you willing to do something that is useful for your interests or somebody else's interests, or is it harmful? to your interests. And so now we have a much richer array of mapping the stuff of this world, things according to fitness, to morality, and to utility. And these are what I call the core values. Each of these core values is fantastic. We use them all the time in various iterations, but they also have their limitations. So let's just take the axis of morality. When we say that something is good or bad, like in the Bible, it opens up, the whole of creation begins, and God said it was good. Well, what the heck does good mean? Does that mean that it is internally or inherently good? Is it an internal quality independent of God? Or does God say that it's good because it conforms to a prior model that God has an idea of? Or is it good because it performs as it should? Or is it some sort of arbitrary epithet? And these kinds of questions come to play not just for God, but for you and me as well. When you say something is good, what you just did today was good. What do you mean by that? When you say something is bad, what do you mean by that? It's really unclear. You have to be able to define and defend why you say something is good or bad in the moral arena. And when you say something is right or wrong, you have to be measuring it against some sort of measuring stick that is outside of that instant. So, for example, the mathematics thing. Which measuring stick are you using to assess whether it's right or wrong? Is it according to the rules of mathematics or the rules of aesthetics? Which measuring stick? And so often in our social arena, we talk about things being right or wrong, but is that in reference to, say, office rules or a company's code of conduct or institutional policies, some sort of guild? I'm a rabbi, and my rabbinic guild tells me that if I transgress its rules, if I engage in wrongful behavior, I will get slapped on the wrist, and I will have to engage in some form of tshuva and reparations. But they can't throw me in jail. But the law can. But there are several layers of law as well. And so when you say something is right or wrong, you need to declare or disclose what measuring stick you are using to evaluate that thing. And then similarly, when we say that something is useful or harmful, you're saying that that is useful or harmful vis-a-vis somebody's consequences or outcomes. But whose consequences? Is it mine? Is it the patient's? Is it the congregation's? Is it the country's? Is it the environment's? Whose interests are you championing when you say something is useful? And if you say it's mine, well, I happen to be many things. I'm a rabbi, I'm a professor, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a citizen. So which of my interests are you actually talking about when you talk about my interests? And when do you start the clock? When do you start measuring that you are actually going to be changing, influencing, impacting my interests, good or bad? And when are you going to stop it? And how are you going to measure it? These are just some of the dimensions that utilitarians or consequentialists have to address in order to justify their use of consequentialist logic. So each of these axes, while great and useful, they are also problematic. But they help us gain clarity on what our position is on a particular topic. And it could very well be that that position on a particular topic, let's say abortion, your position on abortion might shift over time during the course of your life, depending on your own experiences, depending on where you live. But that is just that. It's just your position on that particular topic. It's your conclusion. The question is, how did you reach that particular conclusion? And I suggest to you that you have core values that are at play shaping that final position of yours. We've spoken about fitness and morality and utility, but there might be other core values of yours. Say you're about to decide what vehicle to purchase. Maybe you have a commitment to sustainability. That's a core value. Or holiness. What does Judaism have to say about that particular topic? Or some of us are very much committed to issues of justice and fairness. Or in the field of biomedicine, the notions of non-maleficence or beneficence. Some of us are very much concerned about righting historical wrongs. And so we take egalitarian issues and equity issues very seriously. And so option one, when we are confronted with a dilemma like a trolley problem, option one will maximize our core values in this way. But it's not the only option. Option two is also there, but it maximizes our core values in a different way. Option three, option four, and we're all looking for option five that maximizes all of our core values, but I suggest to you that option five really doesn't exist. We're going to have to be okay with suboptimal outcome, suboptimal decisions. So we've spoken now for a few moments about values and conclusions. Let's turn for a moment to motivations and reasons. So I would like to use, carrying on the theme of maps, the history of cartography to talk about motivations. Ziva Kunda, in this very fascinating paper about 30 years ago, he makes the case that we are motivated reasoners, that we are not purely rational beings making decisions with unadulterated free will. We are precognitively motivated. And sometimes we are goal-oriented thinkers, sometimes we're accuracy-oriented thinkers, and I'm going to add a third one called ego-oriented. And I'll use the history of cartography to explain it. Goal-oriented thinkers look at the world in a particular way. And it's driven predominantly by a goal. So this here is one of the earliest maps. It's called an OT map for obvious reasons. What sits at the center of an OT map? What's at the center of an OT map? A T? Well, here's a version of it. And let's zoom in. Yeah. Ah, thank you. Yes, indeed. It is Jerusalem. So OT map makers are goal-oriented thinkers. They look at the world according to some sort of ideology or goal. It's like going to your local mall and you're looking for your next pair of jeans and you go into that mall. You have malls here in Dallas, right? You go into that mall and you bypass the bakery and the electronics store and the shoe store and you go directly to that clothing store where you know your favorite jeans are. And you distort everything else. Everything is a blur to you. You don't really care. You don't notice what's going on around you. You're just goal-oriented. And this is really important. You need to be goal-oriented in this world in order to get stuff done, in order to get that pair of jeans. But it does, unfortunately, distort the world around you. And even if you do try and pay attention to the world around you, it's often really important for you to acknowledge that how you color the world outside of your goals, it's coloring it in a prejudicial way. So this map from Mr. Woodbridge in 1827, it looks like it's a pretty good map, right? That it's not distorted like an OT map. But let's take a closer look. He says that this is a moral and political chart of the world, according to government decree of civilization and the number of inhabitants. And here's his key. The green, he flavors as savages. The brown are barbarians. The other green are half civilized and white are civilized. He has a bunch of different kinds of government. And then the religions that he has mapped out. There's Christianity, there's Catholic Christianity, there's Protestant Christianity, there's Greek Christianity, there's Christian missions, there's Mohammedans, and everybody else is a pagan. So what looks like a reasonable, unbiased chart of the world is actually already skewed because of how this person is motivated, is goal-oriented. He wants to say, we white Christians, we are civilized, and everybody else, y'all are not. And so it's really important for us to recognize that we need to have goals. That's what enables us to get dressed, get to synagogue on time for the lunch and learn. You need to have goals. You need to be goal-oriented, but it could also distort the world in perhaps damaging ways. But by the mid-19th century, a new way of looking at the world emerged, which is to, instead of imposing upon it exogenously some sort of ideology, especially a theocratic ideology, William Smith, a geologist, began describing the world for what it actually is. And he began to map rock outcroppings because he began to see, especially in Britain, that there were rocks over here and rocks over there that looked exactly the same. And so he began to put together those patterns and created new maps of the world that NASA has now done, moved into the digital arena. An accuracy-oriented thinker is really good at helping you focus in on details. But when you focus in on details, you can become pixelated. Those details become really pixelated. It's like going to that mall and you see the bakery. And you look at the bakery and you see there's a window there between you and the baked goods. And you see there's a smudge on that window. And you look down at that smudge and say, wow, that's amazing. Is it on the inside or outside of the window? There's a piece of grain in it. Is that from the shore? Is it from the mountains? Where's that grain of sand from? And then you're so focused on those tiny little details that you've next here, the mall announcer saying that the mall is closed. So you've spent a great deal of time looking at the facts of this world, but you haven't really achieved your goals. And we need to be accuracy oriented from time to time, especially when, say, your healthcare is needs attention, or when a loved one needs attention. We need to be accuracy and attentive to those issues. And welcome to the 21st century, where you are never off the map. You are the center of the map. It is ego-centered. And we need to be ego-centered, especially in times of, say, a pandemic. You need to take care of yourself. You need to be compassionate upon yourself. And that is different from being goal-oriented or accuracy-oriented. It's okay from time to time to pay attention to yourself. I live in the city of Atlanta, and there are, I think, 17 Peachtree streets. So I don't care. I don't know them. I'm a transplant. I grew up in Seattle. I don't know them. All I know is that as long as I'm on that map, I will get to my destination. As long as I pay attention to where I am, I will arrive. And so being ego-oriented is important from time to time. And how you are motivated will shift how those core values of yours will function. Because if you are accuracy-oriented or, say, goal-oriented, it will shift which core values are going to be relevant for this particular moment. And then it will also eliminate some of your core values and highlight and diminish others of your core values. In other words, it's going to shift how your core commitments are actually going to play out in this particular moment. So we've spoken about values, we've spoken about motivations. Let's talk about reasons for a second. We all want to be reasonable, but there are many different ways that you can be reasonable. There are some of us who pound our authorities. We pound the Bible, we pound the Talmud, we pound the Halakha, we pound what our rabbis have taught us and say, because of them, I am going to do X, Y, or Z. Some of us pound schools of philosophy and say, because of this authority figure, I am going to do X, Y, or Z, and I am justified in doing X, Y, or Z because of that authority. That is a valid way of arguing, but it's not the only way of arguing. Another way is to turn to evidence and science and data, a more of an empirical approach, and say, well, here's the outcomes, the evidence-based medicine. Instead of what authority figures have said, let's make decisions based on the data. Others of us say, well, no, let's pay attention to our experiences, our individual experiences, our collective experiences. Let's be anthropologists or sociologists and see how we actually live and how people actually live. That is how we're going to, that should be guiding our decisions. And others of us use a variety of different logics, but there's tons of different logics, analytical logics. And these are just some of the classes of reasons that we use in our daily conversations with ourselves and with our loved ones about what we should be doing. The real question is, are you persuasive? because how you speak to a child is going to be different from how you speak to, say, a company like an insurance company or your colleagues or your spouse. So you have at your disposal, in your brain, myriad different reasons to support what you want to do. The question is whether those reasons will fall on deaf ears, whether they will persuade your audience to see that your conclusion is actually not just what you want to do, but it's the good thing to do, it's the moral thing to do, it's the right thing to do, it's the useful thing to do. And so ethics, I suggest, is comprised of all of these components. So how does this play out? How might it play out? So say you walk into a room, whether it's a clinic, a house, a business meeting, it doesn't really matter. And all of a sudden you're confronted with a problem that there is no clear answer about what you should do. I suggest you brainstorm. What can you do? Brainstorm your options. Those are your conclusions, your positions. And then figure out what are good reasons and bad reasons for each of those options. Then figure out how are you motivated and how are the others who are in this moment motivated? Are you driven by ideology? Are you driven by facts? Are you driven for ego reasons? Say your profession is on the line. And what are the core values that are truly at stake in this moment? And once you have done that, which of the core values are truly at stake, it will help you go back to those concrete conclusions and figure out which of those best instantiates those core values. Because God forbid you do something that contravenes or contradicts your core values. You want to do something that shows that you're an integral individual. And if you do this process iteratively, and it could take a few moments, you'll be able to wean out those options that sounded okay at the first, but actually are no longer relevant and good and healthy and true to who you are. And this can help you clarify what would be the most ethically defensible position, action to do in the moment. So these are the components that I think make up ethics. Ethics is all of these things. And where I find most people struggle is that they jump from values to conclusions. And they skip over thinking about how they are internally motivated. And they also skip over the really important thing called critical thinking. What are your reasons to justify your position? And I also try and encourage my students and audiences to really dig deeper into not just knowing what people hold, what are their positions on the topic X, but why they hold those positions. Because that's where it gets really interesting, is understanding why people are choosing to vote a particular way, why they stand on a particular topic a particular way. I don't really care what your position is on a topic. I want to understand why you hold that. What are these other things that are at play behind it? So once you dig into those things, you'll find that ethics can help you reveal a little bit more about yourself in the process. So this is an introduction to ethics and my way of introducing it. And I welcome comments, questions, concerns, doubts, anxieties. Where can we clarify things? Where can I trouble things? Go for it. So absolutely. Absolutely. You bring in your biology, not just your biology, but also your biography to every single moment. And I would like to think that in the academy today, and certainly in congregations, there's an acknowledgement that we are not dispassionate, disembodied entities. We are embodied, passionate entities with our unique histories. Thank you. With our unique histories. And we need to embrace that and figure out the ways in which those uniquenesses influence our decision-making in this particular moment. Great. Other questions or observations? Yeah.
Hold on just a second. Oops.
Third of the way.
So
We met.
I just wanted to make sure that you knew this question was coming from the
Yes.
president of the
Ms.
synagogue.
President. Please go ahead now.
I give balls. Okay, so this is a multifaceted, multifold question, but is the perfect purpose for ethics for ourselves only? Or is it to push and persuade other people to think and feel like we do? How has the debate changed since fringe thinkers and conspiracy theorists have been given a mouthpiece and a platform and have convinced other people to think the way they do, which may go against some moral compass that we have or some ethical dilemma that others have? And is ethics as a whole now just very debatable?
Great question.
Sorry.
Great question. Who here would like to answer that question?
Rabbi Crane, you should know that all of our presidents present questions like that.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to know that you're led by very astute individuals. Anybody want to try and answer that question, please? Please. So, is ethics only individual? I think that we can answer that question. Yes, it is only individual, and it's not only individual. It is individual and communal. And it's not just individual and communal, it's also universal. And so there are things that all civilizations do agree upon. Murder. Every civilization that I have ever come across, either extant or historical, has considered murder to be the unlawful killing of another person, to be reprehensible. And there are certain consequences that murderers would face, depending on the civilization. So there are some universal commitments out there, but their communities also have their commitments. Families have their commitments, and individuals also have their commitments. So I think it's, yes, of course it's individual, but there are also universals, larger and larger groups. What those commonalities are, that's part of our study, and why this field is so fascinating. The question about the state of ethics today, given that outliers have been able to take advantage of mouthpieces, of technology to get their ideas out there. This is, I think it's not to say that ethics has been dissolved, but I think that this is a crying out that we need to have thoughtful civil discourse, all the more so in a time when people are willing to stand up and say, this is my position on X, Y, or Z, and it's a fringe position. We need other people standing up and saying, okay, that's nice. Why? Why do you hold that reason? Why do you, not that reason, why do you hold that position? And dig, what is your motivation? What are your core values? And more often than not, I suggest that you will find that those people who hold a provocative fringe position, their core values are contradicted by that position. That they are internally inconsistent. And our challenge, our responsibility as citizens, as neighbors, as family members, is to help them come to recognize that their position is internally inconsistent. But that means that you have to have the cojones, the gumption, the chutzpah, to have an uncomfortable conversation with those people who are outspoken, loud bullies. We need that. We should not be shying away from asking people to disclose the reasons for their positions. Again, I don't care what your position is. Do you have justifications for your position? Your positions could be something that's antithetical to me. But that should not preclude me from asking you why you reached that conclusion. And if you can't explain it to me or to yourself, then you need to rethink about why you hold that position. And we need you, everyone, to engage in that collective conversation. Great question. Other questions? Yeah.
Hold on.
I'll repeat. So on a similar vein, a lot of the technology that we use these days to search information, to go on the net, to go on Facebook, all of these different applications will spit out information to us based on prior behavior. A lot of people have awareness about this. Some people have more, some less. It becomes more easy for a certain position, a certain interest, a certain perspective to become bigger and bigger in the sense that you're always getting the same information coming at you. What is our responsibility as members of organizations, communities, of citizens, from the perspective of ethics and morality, to take a stand or make changes so that our children, our friends, our communities can have a more broad awareness of different information and different perspectives, so that we can then have more constructive dialogues when there is disagreements?
Wonderful question. So if I can reframe it into my language, if I may, you're asking about how we often live in these bubbles of self-reinforcing feedback loops. And how is it that we can feel comfortable encountering others who are not in our bubbles? Is that more or less getting close to what you were talking about? Yeah. So oftentimes when we're doing a search for information, we are often getting it from sources that already agree with us and reinforce our worldviews. And so as a teacher, I tell my students, you need to not be satisfied with Wikipedia or CNN or BBC or the New York Times. Those are great resources. That's a place to start, but not end your research. And it's really important for you to go find sources whose biases are different from your own. So how many of you have ever traveled outside of the United States? Has that been a transformational experience? Yeah, because you encountered the other, a different geography, a different topography, a different climate, a different people, a different language, different culinary experience, etc. But it helped you appreciate the peculiarities of your own community and your own background because you went out of your comfort zone and went someplace else. We do this in the physical arena, and you have a passport. And you look at your passport from time to time and say, I remember when we went on that trip. And it bubbles up great images and emotions inside of you. It's that experience of appreciating the other that helps you appreciate the uniqueness of yourself and your own communities. I think that that's what education is meant to do. Education, at least this is the metaphor that I use with my students, is that education is not a ticket to get you to your destination. When you get your ticket, now they're digital, but you dispose of it upon arrival. You have no more use for it. I think education is your passport. You go to this country over there called philosophy. You get a stamp from taking that course. You go to this country over here called biology. You get a stamp. You go to this course over here called history. You get a stamp. And you collect all of these different cultural and different worldviews and perspectives and different ways of looking at the world. And you realize that no one of them has a monopoly on truth or value. And that you need to have these multiple perspectives in order to appreciate the complexities of this world. And it is that passport that you will continue to revert back to for the rest of your life that will put the tools in your head to be able to evaluate those complexities. So I think that we have the responsibility to have intellectual passports, not just physical ones. You need to be taking responsibility and go to a different foreign country intellectually. If you're home If you like to study fiction, great. Try some nonfiction. If you're a history buff, great. Try some physics. If you're a political junkie, fantastic. Go learn some underwater basket weaving. Whatever it might be. But at least intellectually visit another country, because that is how you will come to appreciate the complexity of this world. And we need to feel liberated enough, comfortable enough in our own skins and our own minds to open up our passports, our intellectual passports, and go explore. So this is something that I try and cultivate in myself. This is something I encourage my students to do and my colleagues to do, my children. And it's fun. It's really, really fun. But it also means that I don't have a monopoly on truth. So I have to be a little bit humble. And I hope that that will give all of us an opportunity to participate in the conversations.
We have an additional online question.
Fantastic.
Rabbi Christian.
So I'm asking from our online chat here that asks, so how do you adjudicate a conflict between two parties or peoples when they see their ethics are both in the upper right quadrant, meaning that they're both right and good, but nevertheless, they are not agreed upon by those two parties, and the other position is unacceptable to each party?
This is when you go to your local rabbi, and your local rabbi will say, "You're right," and turn to the other one and say, "You're right." No? That there are going to be times when that is the case. That there are situations where both parties feel that they are in the right and the good, the morally useful, and the holy. And it could very well be that that is correct. And that's okay. It is okay for us to exist in paradoxes. Judaism embraces paradoxes. We are B'Tselem Elohim and made out of dust and ashes. We're ethereal and material. That's a paradox. And we embrace that. You are commanded to forget Amalek. That is a paradox. And we embrace that paradox. And there are a couple of other paradoxes. Judaism embraces these paradoxical moments. And I think that there will be some, not frequent, but some occasions where we have to be okay with that uncomfortable reality that I am right and good, you are right and good, and zeo. What's the Aramaic Talmudic phrase? Teiko? Teku. Okay, that's the way it is. So there are going to be some times when we can't adjudicate.
This will be the last question for everybody, and then we'll, thank you, Andy. Yeah.
It seems to me that to respond to the question that was just posed online, which was to adjudicate between to adjudicate a dispute between two parties who feel that what they're doing is right and good, that you sometimes have to think out of the box as to how to adjudicate that dispute. And I mean, among other things, I'm a mediator, and sometimes what you're trying to do is find a result that is acceptable to both sides, even if it's not everything they could want, because sometimes people feel the need to resolve the dispute takes a higher level of importance than the dispute.
Fantastic observation. Absolutely. There are going to be times when compromise is the best outcome. It's the second best option. The first best option is that you agree with me. The worst case option is I have to agree with you. The second best option is for both of us to compromise, that we both get 75% of what we wanted. And there will be circumstances where that might be called for. And you're right. In those moments, the adjudicator will probably need to dig a little bit deeper into values. What are the two values of these two opposing parties? that are in conflict with each other or apparent conflict? What are their core values? And are there any that overlap, that are shared? And can we plumb that shared value for perhaps a commonality, a grounding for that compromise where they will both feel comfortable and not begrudging the outcome? So yes, I agree with you. Sometimes compromise is the preferred outcome, but it is still a suboptimal outcome.
Rabbi Dr. Crane, thank you for a wonderful introductory session. Please join me in expressing our appreciation. We thank everybody who has joined us this afternoon, both online and in person. I remind you that this is session number 1, and we look forward to a wonderful evening tonight, beginning our early start for Kabbalat Shabbat services at 6:15, dinner, and a very special presentation afterwards tomorrow morning, as well as on Motzei Shabbat, and some special sessions with our students and parents on Sunday. We're thrilled, very excited to learn with you during the course of the weekend. Thank this special family for enabling us this all to happen. Have a good afternoon, everyone, and early Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you later. Thank you.